American Pacific Islander Nurses Association of Nevada presents Healthy Mondays with AAPINA of Nevada. Start the week healthy and right with interesting conversations on living a healthy lifestyle. And now, your Healthy Mondays host, Dr. Mary Faye Axon Armstrong.
Aloha! Good evening. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat na imbag na rabi, maayong gabi. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pakikinig sa aming programa at patuloy na pagtangkilik sa Healthy Mondays. I'm yours truly, Dr. Mary Faye Axon Armstrong, founding president of the Asian American Pacific Islander Nurses Association of Nevada and professor in nursing at Roseman University of Health Sciences College of Nursing. So tonight, we continue our broadcast, our fifth and last episode of Anti-Asian Hate Crimes, What is Your Role? This is a series, and so we have our first, second, third, and fourth series, and now it's our fifth series. And we are focusing on the lesson we gain from the recent hate crimes against the Asian population. If we don't talk about it, who will? We need to speak up and make it known that this is not acceptable. The hate crimes against ethnic minorities should be a thing of the past. In this modern world, with interracial marriages, we are a family of different colors, no longer a family of color or a population of color. United States is composed of diverse people, diverse culture. As human beings, we are all vulnerable to declining health. And the process of vulnerability is a topic critical in understanding and improving diversity and inclusion, especially in patient care, with a clear message that everyone is important. So tonight, we have a very special guest who will share with us her insights and perspective on how we can move forward beyond the hurt and fear and just focus on the lesson. So in 2020, Dr. Cheryl Brewster joined the senior executive leadership at Roseman University College of Medicine as Senior Executive Dean of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, SED-DEI. She will lead the development and implementation of proactive diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in support of the college's strategic plan to create a learning and working environment where all have an opportunity to succeed. As SED-DEI, Dr. Brewster will actively engage students, faculty, and staff to further behaviors, attitudes, and policies that support diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, welcome to Healthy Mondays, Dr. Cheryl Brewster.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for agreeing to be our guest tonight.
Oh, that was an easy yes. Just for you, Martha.
Yay, thank you.
And please call me Cheryl.
Okay, Cheryl, and call me Mary Faye also.
Thank you.
So, Cheryl, can you tell us more about yourself or anything about yourself that you want our listeners to know?
Sure. So, as you know, I recently relocated here to Las Vegas. So, amid COVID-19 in June is when I started my tenure here in Nevada at Roseman University's College of Medicine. I'm here with a team of folks from Miami who are charged with opening up the med school and getting it off the ground and running and getting medical students here and attending our College of Medicine, which we think provides a unique opportunity for learning for our students and also for our faculty, and to just ensure that we are making sure that we are changing the face of medicine, particularly for Southern Nevada, by increasing the number of underrepresented students in medicine and thereby hopefully increase the number of physicians into the Southern Nevada area.
Wow, that's a big endeavor, and I'm sure that you have met a lot of people in the community.
Yes, we've spent a lot of time in the community. We will continue to spend a lot of time in the community, much of which resembles Miami, where you have pockets of wealth and pockets of poverty, and where you are finding people that are going under-resourced areas without healthcare and without access to adequate healthcare to address their healthcare needs. And so you're looking at disparities amongst many communities that are underrepresented and under-resourced. And so our goal is to make a healthy community here in Southern Nevada with our Genesis program by introducing pathways and pipeline programs for students that are interested in health sciences. So, we are here for the community, to serve the community, and we will be immersed in the community so people will know who Roseman is.
Yes, and I also agree, and my beliefs in patient care is aligned with the mission and vision and goals of the College of Medicine. That is a holistic view in caring for others.
Correct.
Mind, body, and spirit. And since we are in the holistic view of mind, body, and spirit, and I'm sure that you have heard about the waves of attacks in the older Asian Americans, and also the controversies surrounding it, and then the recent attacks in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about this wave of attacks.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate. I think, what we've seen over the past few years has just been an uptick in hate-related incidents around race and ethnicity that I think is really an unfortunate turn that our country has taken. And I think these most recent attacks we've seen, people that have often been considered, the more they're not aggressive, they're quite friendly, and particularly they're elderly, they are the ones that are getting the brunt of these attacks and unable to really defend themselves against these attackers. And I think, this is just, once again, just a compilation of hate, of mistrust, of, a lot of different variables that come into play. But what I've found is, what comes from this is, people that are afraid of change act out, right? And so, by the year 2050, it is expected that this country will be a majority minority country. And there is fear in that change for a lot of people, and they're not embracing the diversity that everyone brings to the table. And so I think, this is about educating people about differences and getting people to understand that different is good, that everything that people bring to the table is an asset and should be considered an asset and not to their detriment. And so I think once people start to really understand that there is strength in our diversity and that no one is going to miss out on something because another group is achieving success. When one group achieves success, we all achieve success. And so I look at it that way. But I think, these attacks are out of fear of change. And, it is one of those things. There's a saying, it's like, if it can happen to them, it can happen to me, and it can happen to anyone else. And so people need to really understand, this is not just one isolated event. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. And we've seen these over the years where different ethnic groups and minority groups have been attacked, have been subject of attack. And you can literally go down the list of groups that have been either attacked verbally or physically over the years, and you can see that as people shift from attacking one group to another group, you find that those groups tend to band together. And I think that there is strength in these groups banding together to say, no more. We're not going to accept your hate. We're not going to accept the vileness that is being, spewed out there about our groups. And, we're going to push back against this. And, not that we're advocating violence, but we are not going to be accepting of this violence anymore. We're not going to be subjected to these waves of violence anymore.
Yes. And I think that it helps if we speak about it and talk about it, and continue to increase awareness.
Yes.
That change is okay, diversity is okay, the positivity of the change, the positivity of the diversity, because it is something that we cannot stop from happening. Interracial marriage brings about the diversity that we are experiencing right now. Not only diversity in skin color and race, but diversity in ideas.
Yes.
And I think that the first series that we have when Dr. Pao Vu from Nevada State College speak about the history of the hate crimes against Asians. And I'm sure that the history, and everybody knows the history about the slavery and for the African American. And I think that if we continue to have the dialogue and don't let it be swept under the rug, and I think the new generation will have then the history in their mind, and they will realize when they start forming ideas about the other people around them, and I think it will then be a good foundation for them that change is okay, diversity is okay. It's okay that you are different from the other because we are unique. We are created by God as unique, beautiful people. When we are all beautiful in our own way.
Exactly.
And that the diversity and the change is good.
Yeah. I agree. I think, like I said, I do think it goes back to education. And I do think, we have to start with really understanding the history of the United States. And it's not always a pretty history, right? And it goes, as you said, it goes back to slavery, and we can bring it forward to where different groups, once again, have been singled out for various reasons, right? And so I think there has to be some kind of agreement that we can talk about these things, that they are not just a one-off when incidents happen. And, this information should be appearing in our history books, of all of these groups, and to get a better understanding of the historical context in which, people react to certain things, right? Like why there is so much pain associated with these attacks, because it always feels like they're coming for, and the they is just a kind of a term to say when people feel attacked, there's always a they. Who is this they that is doing it to us, right? And so people need to understand when these attacks occur throughout history, they are kind of swept under the rug, and no one does, people don't talk about these things. And so I agree they have to be spoken about on a regular and continuous basis, which is why I think, when you're educating youth, these are things they need to read about in their history books.
And
right?
I think, I agree with you. It should be incorporated in the curriculum, and especially for psychology. I think that when you mention about the fear by the attackers, we don't necessarily look at that because we focus on the victims. And then we don't realize that if we understand what's going on with the mind of the attackers, then we will better understand how to prevent it and how to address it before it escalates into a hate crime.
Yeah.
So I think that, and then I thought about the Native Hawaiians too. When they moved to what we call mainland.
The mainland.
Yes, when we moved to the mainland, and I'm a transplant from Hawaii, so I also had experience in living in Cincinnati, and I mentioned this, Cincinnati, Ohio. So I was in the break room, and I think I was working in an insurance company, and a really cute African American little girl lady from where I work. She said, "Mary Faye, you're not white and you're not black. What are you?" But she said it so innocently, and I'm getting to know her as a coworker, and I just said, "I'm an American." And so she just kind of she was surprised with what I said. And so I think if we take conversations like that in an innocent, non-threatening, non-maliciously, it's just that she really wanted to get to know me.
Right.
And if you look at it that way, everybody look at it that way, then we minimize that feeling of being, oppressed or being discriminated. And I think that it's good that you mentioned about the fear by the attacker, because then we will have a better understanding, just like I said, better understanding of what is happening. What triggered this person in Atlanta, Georgia to start shooting the spa? And then why did it pick the Asian, spa, and why are they? The sheriff is saying that it is due to sexual addiction. So let's investigate it, and I think it's good to investigate it further. And I think it was pointed out in the previous series that we have that they don't necessarily identify it in writing, in legal documents, that it is a hate crime.
Right.
So in that case, then down the line in history, there's no documentation that it was a hate crime. So it was just be general crime. So there is no the collection of all of it. So every time it happens, it becomes an isolated.
Right. Yeah. If you can't call it a hate crime, you're right. It does become what people will say, oh, that's an isolated event. However, the American public is a lot smarter than that, right? Just because the laws are written in a way where it's very difficult to, pursue this as a hate crime. I think the American public has come to the consensus that that's what, it appears to be. That's at least what I thought it was when I initially saw it and heard about it, that it was a hate crime because it was directed towards a specific group of people. And whether or not there was addiction involved, and there very well could have been, I'm not saying there isn't. However, why select this subset of businesses, right? When you could have chosen a different subset of businesses that weren't Asian owned, if it was just about sex addiction. And so I just feel like, not owning up to what this is does make it appear as if it is an isolated event. But I guess the thing that I want to bring home is that the American public has a different sense of what it was. And there was a lot of just outrage at it not being considered a hate crime by the legal sense, the law of the law. But, I think we're savvy as Americans. We see through, this posturing that, it is what it is. And, if you feel like, it is a hate crime, then it is a hate crime. It's all about perception, right? And so my perception is how I view it. And I think you're going to see that most of America is seeing this as a hate crime.
Yes, and I think it was pointed out previously by Dr. Vu that there is something amiss in the legal system.
Yes.
And that sometimes, we don't want to say that they just don't want to do their work or their job in pursuing and investigating it. The other dilemma that we have is if they don't verbalize, or we don't have any I wanted to say evidence that they are really hate crimes, because I think in the legal system, they have to say exactly that, I hate these Asians,
right.
Or they made a comment prior to their actions of shooting them that I hate these people.
Right.
So if they don't have the evidence with that, then they could always, investigate further and interview people around this person. He's a young man. Who did this. So if it is truly a sexual addiction, then we need to do a better job in identifying, what this triggers,
right.
Our mental health system. We need to do something here also in Nevada. I mean, I'm digressing with this, but somebody told me Mary Faye, we need to do something, be a spokesperson with developing and improving our mental health system.
Yeah. Well, that is definitely true. And so mental health providers are essential, but they are, far and few. We need way more than what we actually have. And so, I think one of the things that is vital is having these mental health services. And then to think about how people have spent the last year and might not have been able to access their mental health services because things were shut down, might not have been able to get their medication because of all these shutdowns. And for folks that are on medication, their therapeutics are essential to follow in order for them not to regress. And so, you bring up a lot around mental health, and I think that is definitely one aspect. But the other aspect is, this person was able to register for a gun and pick up a gun the exact same day. So that's a concern, particularly when you're talking about someone that has mental health issues. This is about the screening and ensuring that people are properly screened for firearms. If you want a firearm, own a firearm, that's great, but there should be a process whereby people are screened. I have to take a driver's test in order to get a driver's license. There's just things that you have to do before you can actually obtain some things. And so I think, not that it needs to be super difficult, but can we at least get a proper screening for firearms for folks that want to own a firearm? And, just like I have to renew my driver's license, I should have to show that I am of sound mind and body to operate a firearm, right?
Yeah.
Just, I have to do it for driving a car. I have to wait until I'm 18 to be able to purchase alcohol, 21 now. It was 18 when I was growing up. But, there are just things that should be in place to prevent something like this happening. And I think, as a society, we are failing folks that suffer from mental illnesses.
There has to be some accountability. There has to be someone who needs to be responsible. Just like you said, you need to have a driver's license to drive.
Right.
And you have to go through the test. You have to go through the testing of the driving.
A written test,
yes.
A driving test. I was just like, that's a lot to just drive a car, right? And why isn't it equally as strenuous to own a firearm?
They make it easy, yeah. But I think that I hear the controversy about that, where you don't want to make it easy, but you don't want to make it difficult
Right.
for people who really need it.
Right.
Especially with times like this, you hear about the Colorado shooting. Isn't that? Somebody told me, Mary Faye, have you heard about that? But that one, just like you said, the public is now more attuned with what is reality, what is true. Even with the social media, the Americans now are more. They have more tools to find out and investigate and research for themselves.
Yes.
What is really the truth
Right.
and reality. Although everybody had their own perspective on the reality, but it's still, you can see the evidence when you research. And we encourage that. When you hear something in the news, in the social media, you do your own investigation.
Yes.
And then you can put two and two together and see, like, is this really happening? Is this really a hate crime? And even though the legal system is saying it's not, well, obviously the evidence is right there. They just need to put it in writing, and they just need to further investigate it to call it is. And please call it as it is,
Right.
and not what you think that it should be, because you don't want to further an investigation, that it's easier to just do it this way so we can close the case. I think that I would think that has been happening in the past, and that's why this hate crimes is continuing during these modern times.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that you said that it should be incorporated in the curriculum.
Yeah.
And make it a discussion, make it a class discussion. And what do you think? Have a debate, like, what do you think? Is this a hate crime or is it not? And what is the evidence? And so this will help our younger generation to then have an awareness.
Yes.
Of, if they're about to say something or do something on another person, regardless of their race, is this an acceptable behavior?
Right.
So then with that being that incorporated in the curriculum, they have a discussion, then it makes the younger generation think about
Right.
things.
And step up and be allies, right? It's so important that there are allies to all of these minoritized groups. And we can be allies to each other, but oftentimes when minoritized groups get together, there's this level of, this is mine, this is yours, and neither do we cross. So there needs to be a coming together of minoritized groups as a whole, to right the system, right? To to rewrite it, to, get folks in office that will answer to us and not, the will of big corporations, but to the actual people that voted them in, that elected them in. And I think that is a lot of the issue where minoritized groups don't vote in the smaller elections. This is not something that is ingrained in minoritized group to go and access your right to vote. For various reasons, particularly for immigrant communities, it might not be as important to them, but for everyone to understand that if we want to see this change systemically, everyone has to participate in this system. They have to participate and vote for what they believe to be the right thing, right? And whatever that right thing is for you, but my feeling is if you only get 40% of the general population to vote in an election and you think that's when you have a 66%, there are countries where there's 100% people voting in an election, which we've not ever had. When you think about our history and voting and election and the democracy and the process, we've never had where we were 100% of, people voted for various reasons, right? And so, if everyone took it upon themselves to just educate themselves about voting and their right to vote, they understood what their vote meant, right? You could change an entire system.
I think I'm thinking about the presentation that I'm preparing for, the mistrust in government. And I think it goes with, I know I'm digressing again, with the COVID-19 vaccinations.
Right.
Please get your vaccines when it becomes available. Please. I know I have to put it in.
Yes, it is important
so
if we are to get back to some level of normalcy.
Yes. And so, so it came to my mind about the mistrust in the government system and why maybe one of the reasons why we don't have 100% voting capacity in the United States. And I think that going back to what you said, we need to be on the table of the decision making. We need to put individuals there who will speak on behalf of the ethnic minority group, who has the experience of what we're actually going through and who has the experience of what are our needs. And so someone who really knows what the ethnic minority group needs and someone that the ethnic minority group trusts. And so when when the election comes, they were likely to vote because they know who they're voting for,
right,
and that they trust that this individual is going to speak on their behalf.
Right.
And then also this individual will put in initiatives and bills to serve the population who voted for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you were saying earlier, that you need to have someone who can speak on your behalf, advocate for you 100%, and not be attached to a corporation for something else.
Yeah. So I just think there's a lot at stake here as we move through the next few years, and I think people really need to understand, unless we see monumental change in the government, we're going to see incidents like the Atlanta incident happen more frequently, unfortunately. I think, we've been in a major wake-up call for this country the last few years. And people are, somehow waking up to this shock of, this isn't who America is, but this is who America is.
No.
If you think about how America was founded, if you think about, the history of the United States, this is not shocking to groups that have been traditionally underrepresented or minoritized. And so, because if you are in the oppressed group, you feel it constantly. You feel it all the time. It is not new. These things with the police, these things with hate crimes, this is not new to minoritized communities. It is just now coming out because of social media, because we've raised awareness around these issues over the last few years, that now America is waking up and saying, oh my goodness, who is this new America? And they're not liking this new America. And I just say it's been here all along. You just weren't looking.
Or it wasn't shown on TV. And so I think that we have to wake up and see that this is now what is happening in America. And this is real. And this is something that is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to stereotype people and believe that this stereotyping is the one that's going to give you the decision making of they are not as important as us. So they deserve to disappear or be gone. Yeah. And so that is not what America is about. I remember moving here from Hawaii that what they say, America is the land of milk and honey. Are we still the land of milk and honey?
That's a very good question.
Yes.
That's a very... For some it is. For others it's not.
So what do you suggest we as community do to prevent these incidents from happening here in our backyard? I think we generalize it and talk about America itself, but how about here in Southern Nevada, here where we are right now physically?
Yeah, so I think, sort of what I said before is really groups coming together and having these dialogues between them. You can't separate African Americans from the AA. You just can't. The AAPI from the Latinx. Everybody needs to come together, right? And everyone needs to be having this dialogue to understand that, we all are fighting for the same milk and honey, so to speak. And how can we do it collectively? How can we move from this individualized way of looking at Southern Nevada and Las Vegas and look at it more as a collective, all of us coming together to say, we want a better Las Vegas. We want to see improvements for everyone, not just for a certain group of people. And that, we cannot have this sort of, not that it's bickering, but we can't have this mentality where we operate in silos or according to a group in which we identify, right? There has to be this cross-pollination. No longer can we operate in silos. So that is what I push for. I can't advocate, for anything greater than everyone to come together and to just really begin to have these difficult dialogues. It's like you said, having these conversations across racial and ethnic lines is important. Having them within is great, but you need to have them across the lines as well in order to make an impact in the community of Southern Nevada.
Yeah, that's. I think when you're talking about that, we need to have a unity of our purpose and our cause instead of, this is what AAPI population needs. This is what the African American community needs. This is what the Hispanic community needs. And I think one of the ways I'm thinking is we need to celebrate each other. We need to celebrate. If a certain ethnic minority is flourishing in this area, we need to celebrate them and we need to encourage each other. It's not, we're doing this for this population or for this population. Mm-hmm. We are all in this together. And I think that the message that we wanted to say is what's happening in one community, if I'm going to look at it globally, with what's happening in one country, affects what's happening in other countries. And COVID-19 had really woken us up for that concept.
There are no hard boundaries anymore.
So in that concept, what's happening with the African American population and that's what happened. It translates now, it's the Asian population is being targeted now. So who's next?
Right.
So this fear, you talk about the fear of the perpetrator, but now this fear of the victims. I could imagine, I'm thinking and then focusing back to the Asian women who were shot to death and how their families are feeling, how their friends who know them personally are doing right now. How are they doing right now mentally? their grieving process. How are they coping with this? Are they just locking themselves inside a house because they feel that I'm going to be next?
Right.
So how can we take away the fear, and how can we encourage them to live their lives and daily lives without having to turn around in their back like I'm going to be next to be shot? Because Asian women right there, they're just doing the spa, they're just having their nails done,
right,
and all of a sudden they're gone.
Right.
So I think that those are, I know that I spoke about, let's transition from the hurt to the lesson.
Right.
The lesson learned is even the perpetrator himself is going through some things. And now the victims, the family, and the loved ones are going through something. Correct. So we're all in this together. Let's find a way and how we can minimize or even remove this hate crimes. I mean, it's a long process. It's going to be a lifelong endeavor for all of us. But
yes,
just like we said, that don't sweep it under the rug and then it's forgotten, and then we have to start all over again with our increasing awareness that this is not acceptable. So time flies when we're having fun.
Yes.
That's my cue. So Cheryl, thank you so much for being our guest tonight.
Thank you for having me.
There's so many concepts and topics and areas that both of us have covered, and thank you for sharing your insights and for rallying up our listeners out there that we are all in this together. We have to unify. We cannot just be operating in silos. Correct. The diversity and the equality and the inclusion. And I always say this: we can have diversity and equality, but if it is not inclusive, then those two are nothing.
Right.
It has to come all three together.
Yes.
Right? Do you have a last minute words of wisdom for our listeners out there?
I mean, I guess the one important thing to remember is just because someone doesn't look like you or speak the same language as you doesn't mean you have nothing in common. In fact, it's just the opposite. You probably have more in common than you think. And to reach out to someone that is different from you, difficult as it may be, in the end, it's probably one of the most rewarding things you'll do, to meet and get to know someone that is different from you, whether it be racially, ethnically. It could be around SES, which is socioeconomic status. It could be you come from different neighborhoods, you come from different countries. Whatever that thing is that makes you different, there's probably many more things that make you more alike than you think.
Thank you, Cheryl, again on behalf of the AAPINA of Nevada. Also, PHLB Radio. Thank you, Johan.
Thank you, Johan.
For giving us this platform to reach out to our community to increase awareness. And remember, everyone, every Monday is a Healthy Monday. Aloha.
The Asian American Pacific Islander Nurses Association of Nevada has just brought you Healthy Mondays with AAPINA of Nevada.
This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio.